Hello and welcome back everyone to Apex Hours and the series of Salesforce development course. We will be talking about Apex triggers in Salesforce today. One of the most interesting topics when we talk about Salesforce Apex development. Before we deep dive into today's topic, this is me. My name is Khyati Mehta. I am a senior Salesforce developer. I am a proud co-founder of WIT Dreaming, one of the prestigious events that has happened in India. I'm also Salesforce Marketing Champion, Group Leader of Salesforce WIT Kolkata, and also the co founder of Crazy Cloud YouTube channel. Here are my barcodes where you can connect with me and ask any questions if you have. Please feel free to scan these codes and connect with me. So today we will be talking about what is Apex triggers in Salesforce, what are the different type of triggers, when should we use these triggers, some trigger events in Salesforce, and also the context variables. So let's start with the basic. What exactly is Apex triggers in Salesforce? So Salesforce Apex triggers is a piece of Apex code in a database that is automatically invoked whenever a special event in the database occurs. Triggers enable you to perform custom actions, be it before or after events, to records in Salesforce, such as insertions, updates, or deletions. Just like database system supports triggers, Apex provides trigger support for managing records. Triggers enable developers to execute custom business logic when certain events occur in Salesforce, allowing for the automation of complex processes and ensuring data integrity. Typically, you use triggers to perform operations based on specific conditions, to modify related records or restrict certain operations from happening. You can use triggers to do anything you can do in Apex, including executing SOQL and DML or calling custom Apex methods. You can use triggers to perform tasks that can't be done by using the point and click tools in the Salesforce user interface. Let's say, for example, you want to validate a field value or update a field on a record. You can obviously use validation rules or flows. But you can also use Apex triggers when performance and scale is important. If your logic is too complex for the point and click tools, or if you are executing CPU intensive operations, Apex triggers will be your friend. Triggers can be defined for top level standard objects such as account or contact, custom objects, and some standard child objects as well. Triggers are active by default when created. So Salesforce automatically fires active triggers when the specified database events occur. Now, the question arises, when exactly should we use triggers? There are lots of automation tools available in Salesforce, as we know. So let's understand when to use Apex triggers in Salesforce. Let's say you want to have integration with external systems, operations on unrelated objects, or logic associated with DML. You might have complex logic incapable of being processed via declarative artifacts. That is where Apex triggers will be used the best. Let's briefly explore how triggers can be applied to each of the scenarios. Firstly, automating business processes. Triggers can automate business processes by responding to specific events, such as record creation or updates. Let's say, for example, you might use a trigger to automatically assign tasks, update fields, or send notifications based on certain conditions. Secondly, enforcing data validation. Apex triggers are effective for enforcing custom data validations that go beyond the capabilities of standard validation rules. You can perform complex validations and prevent the insertion or updating of records that don't meet your specific criteria. Then the next is maintaining the data integrity. You can use triggers to obviously ensure data integrity by enforcing integrity between related records. Let's say, for example, you might implement a trigger to update related records when a parent record is modified. This helps maintaining consistency across the database. Next is executing cross-object logic. Triggers allows you to execute logic that spans multiple objects, enabling you to update or synchronize data between related records. This is particularly useful when you need to maintain relationships and consistency across different types of objects. Next is handling record deletion. You can also implement triggers to handle scenarios where you want to perform certain actions before or after records are deleted. This can include tasks such as archiving related data, notifying, stakeholders, or updating other records to reflect the deletion. Next is implementing complex workflows. When standard workflow rules fall short in meeting your workflow requirements, triggers provide a more flexible and powerful solution. They allow you to implement custom and complex workflows tailored to your specific business needs. And the last, implementing asynchronous processing. Triggers can be designed to initiate asynchronous processing, such as making callouts to external systems, sending, outbound messages, or scheduling batch jobs. This allows you to perform actions that go beyond the immediate scope of the trigger event. So, in each of the scenarios, it's crucial to follow best practices such as bulk safe coding, handling government limits, and thorough testing. This helps to ensure the stability and scalability of your Salesforce development or implementation. Now, we will be talking about what are the different types of triggers. There are basically two types of triggers: before triggers or after triggers. Before triggers are basically executed before the records are saved to the database, which means these are used to perform a task before a record is inserted, updated, or deleted in Salesforce. These are used to update or validate record values before they are saved to the database. These triggers are often, used for validation or to modify the records before they are committed to the database. The next is after triggers. These are executed after the records are saved to the database, which means if we want to use the information the Salesforce system sets, let's say record IDs or last modified date field, and make changes in the other records. The records that fire the after trigger are read only. These triggers are commonly used for tasks like sending email notifications, creating related records, or performing calculations based on the updated data. Now, in this trigger events, we can basically divide before triggers into few insertions, updation, or deletions, and same for after trigger as well. So, before trigger has before insert, which means it's been executed before the new records are saved to the database. Then before update, that means these are executed before existing records are updated in the database. The next is before delete. These are executed before records are deleted from the database. And the after trigger, after insert, where these are executed after new records are saved to the database. Then as after update, these are executed after existing records are updated in the database. After delete helps in executing the records that are after deleted from the database. And there's something new called after undelete. These are executed after records are restored from the recycle bin. Now we will be talking about context variables in Salesforce Apex triggers. In Salesforce, context variables refer to special system variables that provide information about the context in which a trigger is being executed. These variables help developers access details about the records involved in the trigger event and also perform logic accordingly. Some primary context variables used in triggers are trigger.new, trigger.new_map, trigger.old, or trigger.old_map. So let's talk about the purpose one by one. Trigger.new helps in representing the new versions of the records that are about to be inserted or the updated version of the records that are about to be updated. So in before insert triggers, trigger.new contains the records being inserted. In before update triggers, trigger.new contains the updated version of the records. Similarly, in after insert and after update triggers, trigger.new also contains the final version of the records. Next, trigger.new map. This represents a map of the new version of the records. It allows you to access records using their Salesforce record IDs. You can use trigger.new map when you need to efficiently access and compare the new version of the records based on their IDs. It is particularly useful for scenarios where you want to perform operations on records that are being updated. The next is trigger.old. It represents the old version of the records before they are updated. These variables is only available in before update and before delete triggers. In before update triggers, trigger.old contains the original version of the records before the updates. In before delete triggers, trigger.old contains the records that are about to be deleted. And the last is trigger.old map. These represents a map of the old version of the records. It allows you to access records using their Salesforce record IDs. You can again use trigger.old_map when you need to efficiently access and compare the old version of records based on their IDs. Now, these context variables enable developers to compare the state of records before and after an operation, or perform validations and implement custom logic based on the changes. Here, it's important to note that these variable represents collections and they are designed to handle bulk processing efficiently, allowing triggers to work with multiple records in a single transaction. Other than this, there are more few context variables that I'll be discussing, like is executing. It helps return true if the current context for the Apex code is a trigger, not a Visual Force page or a web service or a API call. The next is insert. It returns true if the trigger was fired due to an insert operation, either from the Salesforce user interface, Apex, or the API. There's something called isUpdate. It returns true if this trigger was fired due to an update operation from the Salesforce user interface, Apex, or the API. Next is isDelete. It returns true if the trigger was fired due to a delete operation. Similarly, isBefore. It returns true if this trigger was fired before any record was saved. isAfter returns true if this trigger was fired after all records were saved. And the last is undelete. It returns true if this trigger was fired after a record is recovered from the recycle wheel. This recovery can occur after an undelete operation from the Salesforce user interface, Apex, or the API. So these were some context variables that we frequently use while using Apex triggers. Okay, so now that you know what exactly the trigger does and the basics of triggers in general, what is the importance of triggers, let's see how we can write it in our Salesforce org. So this is the basic syntax of writing a trigger anywhere in your org. So it will start with the trigger keyword and then the trigger name. Trigger name is nothing but the name that you would give to your trigger. It's an identifier or maybe just knowing. It's just a name for the trigger. and on which object you want to write. So object name would be on which object you want to write a trigger on. And then there is something called trigger events in the bracket. So these are nothing but the trigger events that we just learned. Here you can define whether the trigger should be triggered before or after any kind of events that you give. So before insert, before update, before delete, after update, anything that you want to define can be defined here. And then there is the code block. So basically, based on what trigger event you have defined in the brackets, based on that, the trigger will kind of run. So let's move to our org and see how we can write a trigger. So if I want to write a trigger, I will simply click on File, New, and Apex Trigger. I will give the name of the trigger and I'll also give the S object. Once I click on Submit, there's something like this will appear. So always note whenever you give the trigger name and the object, this is the basic syntax it will always come up with. It will have before trigger event, but you can always change it as per you want. So let's say there is a field called important or not in the contact object. It's a checkbox field, and if that field is checked, then one should not be allowed to delete that contact. There should be a pop-up saying that you cannot delete an important contact, because of that checkbox being checked, we know that the contact is important and it should not be deleted. So we can write a trigger for it. So how we can do that? I can simply write before delete here. That means this trigger will be triggered always before the contact is deleted. Because I want to loop it in the contact, I will create a for loop group. And I want all of the records or old maps or old records of the contact, hence trigger.old. Now I want to check whether that field that I have in my contact object. So let me quickly go to edit object and select the API name of that field. So my API name of that field is this. I'll go here and simply copy paste it. So let's say if this is true, then don't allow to delete the record. So there's a method called add error. This will basically pop up when someone would try to delete that account. So I will give my message here. You cannot delete an important contact. Okay. So let's save this. So there's some problem. It says missing. Oh, I missed a colon. See, so it's working fine. It's been saved. So now we'll move to one of the contacts and try to delete the contact. We are in the Jack Rogers contact. I'm trying to delete it and it pops up the notification. It does not let me delete the contact. Why is it so? Because my important field is checked. Let me try and uncheck this field and then try to delete the contact. See, the contact is removed. So this is how my trigger works in Salesforce. So let's move back to our slides. This is how you can write triggers, use triggers in any of your use cases. So this is how you write triggers in your Salesforce org, and this is an assignment for you to do it. Write an Apex trigger that auto-populates a custom field on the opportunity when the account name is entered. It is very simple. All you have to do is check whenever the account name is entered, or whenever there is account name, a custom field should be auto-populated. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the session and it was a good learning for you. You can follow Apex Hours on all of these channels. Thank you.